Hi everyone, and welcome back to another Tech Bytes review. Today we're going to be reviewing the brand new Model F104 buckling spring keyboard. Now, this keyboard is absolutely fantastic for many different reasons, but the things that appeal to me most is that it has the Model M form factor with Model F internals. You heard that right. This is the Model M case, at least on the upper portion, with the Model F, which is the buckling spring over the flipper on top of the PCB with no membrane involved. So this one has all of the benefits of an original Model F keyboard with the layout and the design of the Model M that many of us are familiar with. And quite honestly, if you've used a keyboard in the last couple of decades, you're familiar with this design. This keyboard is a part of the brand new Model F project, which you can visit the project website in the description linked below. It is run by Ellipse, and he did actually provide this keyboard to me. However, this is not a sponsored video. My opinions are my own. He simply asked if I would be interested in reviewing one of the new versions, seeing as I did a review of the original release of the Model F keyboard that he produced a few years back. And if you haven't seen that video, please do check it out, because I'm going to be doing a lot of comparing and contrasting between not only the brand new Model F104 keyboard that we have in front of us with the original Model F keyboard, but I'm also going to be comparing this board with other Model M variants, one of which is the original IBM Silver Badge Model M. So there's a lot of good comparisons. I don't normally do those, but seeing as this is such a ubiquitous design and there are other competing boards out there, I thought it would be useful to see where this keyboard stands out and how it compares to some of the other boards on the market. So that being said, we are still going to do build quality. After build quality, we will move into that compare and contrast, and I'll follow that up with a typing test. So there will be 4 keyboards. There will be the Model F104, the original Model F from the Model F series of projects run by Ellipse, the original IBM Silver Badge, and the Unicomp Model M keyboard. So stay tuned for that, or feel free to jump ahead if that's all you want to see here. But this is slightly different than the other review videos, but all the core components will still be here. So without further ado, let's jump into build quality. Now, one of the first things that I would like to cover with this board is the case. Just like with the other Model F keyboard that I reviewed a few years ago, this does have a solid metal case, which on a Model M, as far as I'm aware, is the only one of its kind that does that. Whereas before, with the original Model F, that used a die-cast zinc case, which made it extremely heavy and also extremely durable and just solid. This does not use the same die-cast zinc case. This is actually die-cast aluminum. Now, that being said, it has some pretty serious heft to it. I want to say it feels slightly lighter than the zinc case, but that could just be that the Model F that I'm comparing to is much more compact, and so maybe it feels a little bit more solid that way. But this is solid metal. It's solid aluminum. We don't even need to try to discuss case creak because it's non-existent. There are no plastic parts in this as far as I can tell. There are different color options. I tend to prefer more of the retro classic style, so I did go with the off-white beige, but I do believe there are other colors like black and industrial blue, gray, things like that if you're interested. You could see, looking at the seam here, everything is perfectly lined up. Something that I noticed and that I know Ellipse takes pride in with the project are getting the tolerances absolutely perfect. And so whenever we're looking at this keyboard, I hope the video does it justice, but there's not a single piece that's going to be out of place. I mean, everything is just machined to a very high degree of accuracy, and the quality really does speak for itself when you lay hands on it. One interesting part about the case, so if we look at the top one, this is new to the project, so this does have the traditional Model M style upper. But if we look at the bottom of the case, we'll see that it's actually using the original Model F XT bottom. And I was told by Ellipse that the reason for that is so that it can house the Model F internals, because if we were to reprint a brand new bottom, everything wouldn't fit in there as nicely. So you are looking at a different bottom than what you might see when comparing to like an original Silver Badge IBM Model M. But again, it's the bottom of the case. It doesn't really matter that much. The important part is that it looks and functions like a Model M, but with the objectively superior Model F switches and functionality in there. So looking at the case, what we have at the bottom is that repairability is still first and foremost one of the main important focuses of this project. So we only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bolts to open up this case. That's it. There's no hidden bolts under stickers. There's no magic little switches or tabs that you run the risk of breaking off when you're trying to open this thing up. It really is as simple as just opening these up. Now, one thing to point out, if you were watching my original Model F video, and we'll look at it in the comparison section as well, you might recall that they were just using standard Phillips head screws. That is not the case anymore. These are now using countersunk T8 bolts. Functionally, it serves the same purpose, and I can't imagine anybody feeling any kind of way about that. It's just a different type of bolt to get into. As long as you have the tools to open it up, it really doesn't impact the functionality at all. Another difference compared to the original Model F, and maybe this was just on the board that I received, but the cork foot pads did come pre-installed. I think both myself and probably most people want them, so again, not really a big deal. One thing I did want to point out, and it was an issue that I brought up on the original Model F, and unfortunately is still here on the Model F104, is the sticker or the label on the back. Whenever we get into the comparison section, I'll show you what it looks like on an original Silver Badge IBM Model M, but there's actually a piece of plastic that's built into the case and laid over the label. My Model M was built in 1990. And the label underneath the piece of plastic is still pretty pristine. There's a little bit of yellowing, but it really held up well. As we can see here, it's already kind of coming up a little bit because it is just a sticker with some silver shiny paper or something that it's printed on. It's not the end of the world. It's really not that big of a deal if you wanted to laminate something and put it over yourself just to kind of protect it. But given just the price for the keyboard and also the fact that this is really an enthusiast board and something that people are probably going to want to hold on to for a long period of time, it would have been nice to have some form of inlay, even if it was just a little recessed area for the sticker to go into so it didn't accidentally get pulled up as it was sliding across a desk or something. Something that's actually very, very cool that I wanted to share. On the original Model F that I reviewed, I was not a fan of the cable, and it was mostly because it was a very thin, smooth plastic cable, and it just didn't give the impression of something that would last as long as the board would. But this time around, the cable is actually improved. So what we have here is a braided cable. It's USB-A. I know everything's trending towards USB-C these days, but honestly, I don't really care as long as it does its job, and this does perfectly fine. The cable is still a little bit too long for my preference. I understand that you don't want to have a cable that's too short. That would be incredibly frustrating. But this one, you can see I've kept it tied up just because it's a ton of extra room. Not a deal breaker by any stretch of the imagination. It really just is kind of a non-issue at this point. But it is a massive thumbs up because braided cables are always a plus in my book. And anything that's going to add to the longevity and durability of the board, in this case, the cable, which is probably the most likely thing to get ripped out of the back or something like that. This is a huge step up. So I'm very, very happy to see that. So let's go ahead and flip this over to the front. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the keycaps themselves. Now, just like the original Model F keyboard that I reviewed a few years ago, the keycaps are phenomenal. I mean, I would argue that these are better quality and just have a better overall feel and printing layout to them than the original Silver Badge IBM Model M. It really is quite incredible to see, and the video just doesn't even do it justice. I mean, everything is so incredibly crisp and clear, you just can't even believe it. I mean, it's without a doubt, one of the best keycaps I've ever seen. Again, definitely more of the retro kind of style, and your options will be limited if you wanted to switch them out due to the underlying barrel not resembling a Cherry MX stem. It is an actual barrel, which is unique to the buckling springs. But the keycaps that come with it are just phenomenal. And this is another aspect that I do remember seeing on the forums, where Ellipse was working back and forth with various manufacturers in China to get this just right and to make sure. I think there was a post where he was talking about inspecting individual keycaps on the batches that came out. So that's how much attention to detail that went into these, and it absolutely shows. So let's talk about the positioning of the keycaps on the board. So I did mention that the keycaps themselves are not going to be your typical Cherry MX. So the way this works with buckling springs is that there's a barrel, and it sticks up out of the well here, and there's a little spring that goes inside that barrel. So it's a circular kind of barrel, and the keycap just plugs right on top of that. So there's no crisscross like you might be used to. And what happens, and we'll show this on the original Model M, is that sometimes these things can get a little wobbly. And I can happily say that is not the case at all whenever we're looking at the Model F104, and the same for the other Model F. The way that this keyboard is designed, you can see there's hardly any play horizontally or vertically on these switches. I mean, there's no twisting. Now, when we look at the Unicomp, we'll see that what having bad tolerances can do. But in this case, these are fantastic. I've been using this for a few weeks now, and all of the keys have stayed perfectly in line with the way that they're supposed to go. Another difference when we look at this Model M compared to the original Silver Badge Model M is that the original uses a two-piece keycap. There's actually a blank piece that goes over the barrel, and then a second piece that has the printed legend on it, and that clicks onto the top piece. What happens with that, especially over decades of use, is that it can get a little rattly. Things tend to wobble around a little bit, and I have a feeling that's why the industry as a whole has kind of transitioned over to more of just using this single keycap piece. I'm sure there's some cost-cutting stuff going on as well, but I actually prefer the single keycap, and this is really about as good as it gets. So now moving into the switches themselves, it's a buckling spring, and it's a Model F buckling spring, and it's also a modern one. So you don't get any crisper, any snappier, any thockier and pingier than what we have in front of us right now. However, due to the case, I'm not entirely sure if it's due to the metal that's used here, so this is die-cast aluminum, or if it's just the fact that it's a metal case in a Model M form factor, but it does sound a little bit more echoey than even the original Model F that I reviewed from the same project. I have a feeling it has to do with there being a lot of extra room in the case, so as you're typing, you will hear a little bit more of an echoey kind of sound. Definitely more echoey than whenever we compare to the buckling spring over membrane, which is going to be seen on the Unicomp and the original IBM Silver Badge Model M. So, and that probably has to do more with plastic case and actual membrane. So again, this is a flipper pad that sits over top of the PCB and slaps down. It's not the end of the world, and actually some people might really enjoy that sound. I personally really like the ping. However, I probably at some point in the future will either attempt a floss mod or sticking some foam into the case to see if I can reduce some of the echo. Again, not a deal breaker, and you really have to be listening to it. But whenever you hear these side by side, this one and the other Model F, it's the same components as far as my understanding, but there is definitely a change in tone. So now we're going to be moving into the new part of this review, which is the compare and contrast. So I'm going to start off by taking a few measurements of each board. We'll start with the Model F104, and then we'll start comparing measurements and also just a few features on each of the boards just to see what they look like when looking at them together. So if we look at the length, we are just a little over 19 inches long, with right at about just shy of 8.5 inches wide. So this is definitely one of the bigger keyboards that you could have on your desk. It's also true to the original Model M Silver Badge by IBM. So if you're looking for something that's true to its roots and as far as dimensions go, and also much heavier, you're looking for the Model F104 here. So this one, we already did the build quality, so we're going to jump into the next, but did want to get those measurements out there. And next up, we'll take a look at the Model F, the first one that I reviewed. So here we have in front of us the very first release of the Model F project. This was a keyboard that I reviewed a few years ago. Again, if you haven't seen that video, check it out in the description below. But let's go ahead and get some dimensions on this thing. So compared to the Model F104, this is going to be much more compact. You can see we're right at about 16.5 inches long, so significantly shorter in length, and right at just under 7.5 inches wide. So this is going to be a much more compact keyboard. It also has a much more compact layout. So one of the issues that I had with this board, and again, no fault of its own, just for my own personal workflow, was that it did not have dedicated arrow keys or dedicated navigation keys. We see them here, but they're not really dedicated. A lot of things need to be activated through layers by holding different key combinations and things. There's also no dedicated function row up at the top. If we look at the case itself, compared to the Model F104, which was die-cast aluminum, this is die-cast zinc. And as I'm picking it up, it absolutely feels heavier. And again, I don't know if it's because it's more compact, but the metal itself just feels much, much denser than what we have on the Model F104. Now, not to say that the Model F104 is a light keyboard. It's absolutely not. None of these are going to be moving around on your desk as you're using them day to day, but it is something that I wanted to point out just in case you have one of these Model F keyboards and you're looking at the Model F104 expecting a similar case. So looking at the back, you can see the bottom is fairly similar to what we saw in the Model F104, just in a much more compact form factor. Instead of having 6 T8 countersunk bolts, we just have 4 Phillips head screws. Pop those out, case comes off, and then you can do what you need to do. I actually did something similar on the cable, which we'll look at here in just a second. But you could see the sticker on the back. This is what I was mentioning on the build quality side for the F104. It is just a sticker. It's been that way since the inception of this project. And I would just like to see, even if it's some kind of cutout section or even just a layer on top, just to preserve this, because I really, really enjoy kind of keeping this around as a part of history. So if we look at just an example of how customizable these boards are, this is what you can do if you're willing to open up the case. So this obviously is not a standard cable that came with it. I threw the original away. I think I spoke about that already. It was just a little too thin and flimsy for me, also too long. So I replaced it with, I don't even know what cable this was, some kind of bargain cable I got online, but much happier with it. It took me less than 5 minutes to crack the case open, pop this buddy in there, and we've been good to go ever since. So these keyboards are just absolutely repair friendly, user friendly, customizable friendly, mod friendly, whatever you want to call it. They're just fantastic. So now let's move into the original IBM Silver Badge Model M keyboard. So here's the original IBM Model M Silver Badge keyboard. Let's start off by getting some dimensions of the Silver Badge IBM Model M keyboard. So just like I mentioned on the Model F104, we are just a hair over 19 inches long and just under 8.5 inches wide. So these dimensions are spot on with the Model F104, which means that, as I've been saying all along, the tolerances of that keyboard are about as good as you could possibly get, and in many cases better than what the original is. So massive thumbs up to the project for staying true to its roots. This was my daily driver for many, many years through the use of a PS2 to USB adapter like this. And there's many, many great things to say about it, but it obviously is showing its age. I mean, we can see where it's missing meta keys here. Obviously, there's no USB support. The keys themselves are starting to wear down. And if you wanted to freeze frame and jump back to some of the comparisons I was doing on the keycaps, you'll notice that these are really starting to show their age compared to the crispness of the Model F104. And I would actually go as far as to say that there is some fuzziness on some of these keys that are not present on the F104. So that's actually incredible, given that, I mean, this is the OG. This is the original. When you hear Model M, this is what started it all. One of the things I did want to point out, so I mentioned how on the Model F104 and also the original Model F that I reviewed, they do not have the 2-part keycaps that the original Model M uses. What that looks like is this. So we have the part where the legend is actually printed on the keycap, and then we also have this blank that sits over the barrel. What happens, and what I was mentioning before, is that these can rattle because there are 2 keycaps there. So this is the case for all of them. You can see that. So there absolutely is going to be some rattle whenever you're using this. It is also a plastic case. So I used to think this was a heavy board, and then I started lifting and using the new Model F project keyboards, and let me tell you what, this is not a heavy board compared to those monsters with their solid metal cases. This is still designed to a very high quality, so you can see there's really no noticeable seam or ugliness where this matches up. The back of the keyboard is also going to be very, very nice and well machined. IBM just did a really amazing job back in the day when they made these. You could see mine was made in 1990. And this was where I wanted to highlight. I wish that there was something like this on the new Model F keyboards. There's a tiny little cutaway square and then a piece of plastic, tape or plastic, something to shield the paper or the label that sits underneath it. It's almost like whenever they made this keyboard, they knew people were going to be hanging on to them. And this is just a really nice extra feature. Other than that, we do have flipper feet. We do not have flipper feet on the Model F104 due to the fact that it uses the Model F XT bottom case, and those definitely did not have flipper feet. Other than that, the brand new Model F104 buckling spring keyboard is better than the silver badge in just about every single way. This one obviously has been used for decades, so the springs themselves are going to be much more worn out. Things are going to be a little bit more wobbly. It's seen many years of use. But not even just that. The quality, and it's weird to say, but the quality and the tolerances that this is machined to just don't seem to be up to par with what we're seeing out of the new Model F series. It's actually quite incredible. So that concludes all the comparison I wanted to do with the silver badge IBM Model M buckling spring keyboard. Next up, we will review our final board, which is the Unicomp Model M buckling spring keyboard. So here we have the Unicomp Model M buckling spring keyboard. Now I wanted to give a little bit of a background on this, just in case you're not familiar with Unicomp or what they do. My understanding is that at some point in years past, IBM was looking to sell the tool and die that they were using to make the silver badge and then after that blue badge Model M keyboards, and Unicomp stepped up and bought them. I believe they're based out of Lexington, Kentucky. So for a long time, they were still using the same tool and die that had been in service since probably the 80s, and things started getting noticeably worse. Through no fault of their own, but the quality of the keyboards coming out was just starting to go downhill because, the tooling had been used for decades at a time. The things wear down. It's just kind of mechanical at that point. So what they did is they overhauled the tooling. I believe they came up with their own based on the original Model M, and they separated it. So you could buy either a classic Model M, which was the old tooling, the original tooling, but the tolerances were definitely off at that point because, well, it had been in use for a long time. Or you could buy one of the more modern ones, and this is the more modern one. Now, as much as I appreciate having this keyboard in my collection, it's probably my least favorite keyboard that I own that I've actually held on to. I have it for sentimental reasons, but I don't like it. First off, the color. This was the only color that the case came in. It's black. It's not what I like. This color scheme it's not retro. It doesn't look like the original. It's just kind of weird. The other thing, if we look at the case, there is some noticeable case creak. You can also twist it pretty easily. See that flex? There's no steel plate like there is in the original silver badge. The case obviously is plastic. The label on the back is extremely cheap. This is a piece of paper that's even chopped off in some places. So you could tell they just tried to pump this thing out and cut as much cost out of the manufacturing process as possible. You can even see some imperfections in the case. There's little swirls from where this thing was printed. So it's extremely cheap. I think at the time that I bought it, it was maybe $98. I'm sure with inflation that's gone up, but overall, it's not the greatest keyboard. It's fine if you're just looking for a buckling spring to do something with, but it's not even remotely close to being in the same ballpark in terms of what we see with the new Model F series or even an original Silver Badge Model M. So, I mean, a 30-year-old keyboard could blow this out of the water easily. The price point is also completely different between these boards, so take that for what it's worth. But let's go ahead and get some measurements on this guy here. So you could see we are just a little under 19 inches long and just under 8 inches wide. So this keyboard is a little bit smaller. The dimensions do not match up to the original Silver Badge IBM Model M. Not the end of the world, but just something to point out. I did also want to take the opportunity to mention that if you wanted a more compact Model F104, there are different case options, as well as completely different layout options for Model F series keyboards as well. So don't let the big bulky case stop you. If you're looking for something more compact like this, or even further compact than what this is, you can absolutely get that on the Model F project website. And now I want to take the opportunity to jump into some typing comparisons between these four keyboards. Here is a typing test of the brand new Model F104 buckling spring keyboard. Here is a typing test of the original Model F buckling spring keyboard. Here is a typing test of the original IBM Silver Badge buckling spring keyboard. Here is a typing test of the Unicomp buckling spring keyboard. Now I wanted to quickly go over the usability for this keyboard. I'm not going to make this section too long because, quite frankly, this layout is something we've all seen before. You shouldn't really need to adapt your workflow to it. I think anybody who's typed on a keyboard probably started with a 104 key layout board like this, even if it was a crappy Dell keyboard that came with your gateway computer back in the 90s. You were probably using a layout very similar to this. So the thing that I had the most issue with that kept me away from really using the original Model F keyboard so much was the fact that it was missing a lot of the dedicated keys. And as you can see, all of those keys are here. I can't tell you how happy that makes me. When I went into this review, I fully expected to use it for about 2 to 3 weeks, maybe include it in my rotation from time to time, and then go back to my trusty Silver Badge Model M buckling spring keyboard. But this thing has just been so good, and quite honestly, it feels pretty much exactly the same while bringing all of the modern features that I wanted out of it. Now, of course, Model F switches where the flipper is hitting the PCB are going to feel a little bit different than the buckling spring over membrane of the Silver Badge IBM, also seen in the Unicomp keyboard. However, the spacing of the keys, the layout, the dimensions, everything is going to be identical, or at least as close to it as humanly possible. So if you're already using a keyboard like that, you'll be able to transition into this without any issue at all. One very important feature, so on the original Model F keyboard, that utilized QMK for the firmware. And I never really had an issue with updating that or flashing new layers to it, but it did involve a little bit of plugging the board in, maybe flashing some stuff to it in order to get different layouts on your board or different layers or things like that. That is gone on this keyboard, and what's here instead is called Vial. I believe the website is vial.rocks. I could be wrong, but the way it works is by using WebHID. Now, as long as you're using a Chrome-based browser, I don't believe this works for Firefox or Safari, but as long as you're using a Chrome-based browser, you just plug your keyboard in. Your browser will detect it whenever you're on the Vial configuration website. You grant it permissions, you just click OK, and then all of a sudden you can do live remapping of your keys. So I was able to do this for Command and Option for a Mac, because that's what I was testing this on, and it was really that easy. There was zero flashing involved. I just plugged the thing in, clicked OK, told it which buttons I wanted to act in which way. Next thing you know, I'm using this thing with a brand new remapped key. This keyboard, from a usability standpoint, has been on par with my Silver Badge IBM Model M and greatly surpasses it in other areas in terms of the compatibility with different operating systems. I mean, you don't need a converter anymore. So you have all the keys, the layout that you're used to, with the ability to do on-the-fly remapping through the browser. It's just really an absolute joy to use, and I don't see myself really ever going back to my Silver Badge IBM Model M. Really big thumbs up. I mean, this, without a doubt, has been one of the best keyboards I've used, not even since I started doing reviews, but since I started collecting keyboards. I mean, this it's as much a work of art as it is a fun and enjoyable keyboard to use and type on. And now, finally, I wanted to do my usual wrap-up with who I would recommend this keyboard for. Let's be honest, this is not the keyboard that you buy if you're just looking for something for your desk job at the office or just a keyboard to enter some data into Excel. This is a keyboard you buy when you're a keyboard enthusiast. You want something that'll last not only your lifetime, but probably 3 lifetimes, and something that you want to be able to display proudly. If you are a keyboard enthusiast, a Model M enthusiast, a buckling spring enthusiast, anything like that, you need to add this to your collection. There's nothing else like it. I sure haven't found anything like it ever. And it not only does it stay true to its roots of the Model M series of keyboards, but it brings the best parts of the Model F and implements them in there while mixing in the best parts of modern keyboard design, which is USB support, on-the-fly keyboard remapping, where you can just do it in the browser. So, I mean, there's absolutely no reason outside of budget concerns to not buy this keyboard. This is one you want to add to your collection. And that concludes today's review, everybody. Thank you for watching. I know this is one of my longer review videos, but quite honestly, this was one of the most fun keyboards to use and review that I just wanted to add a few extra parts, like the compare and contrast and the typing comparisons, because it really was a blast putting this one together. So please let me know if you enjoyed any of those new parts down in the comments below, and if it seems like it's positive enough, I might start doing more comparisons and typing tests in future videos. So thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.